Hi all, this is Wynn. On this channel, we talk about unique places from all over the world. And today we're going to be diving into some fascinating American history that dates all the way back to the times of George Washington and the founding of the US Capitol, Washington, D.C., which of course bears his name. I know a lot of folks basically everywhere else in the world always like to talk about how the United States is such a young country and how we don't actually have that much history in the first place. Well, first of all, Indigenous people have been here forever and have incredible rich histories. Second, United States history is simply fascinating. This whole place is one giant experiment, and in many ways Americans have had to plan in real time for a rapidly expanding population, working within a governance framework that was basically brand new. All right, so let's dive in. Now, did you know that the oldest building on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. is this teeny tiny little 540 square foot house? This is the LOCKKEEPER'S House, and it has stood on the Washington, D.C. Mall since about 1837. The home housed the lockkeeper who for decades was responsible for collecting tolls and keeping records for goods and passengers transported along the canals that once connected the whole city. George Washington, of all people, advocated that the Capitol have canals. Washington played a significant role in planning the city. He initiated that DC replace Philadelphia as the capital. He negotiated the purchase of the land, and he worked with architects and engineers to lay out the city. Much of what Washington envisioned came to fruition and still stands today, including the site of the White House, the 10-mile square federal district, and the Capitol building. Part of Washington's vision is that he believed that canals were essential to the economy of the city and, in effect, the nation. Things were different back then. No cars, no trains, no scooters. You get the idea. So boats were just much more important. The lockkeeper's home was along what used to be the Chesapeake and Ohio, or C&O Canal, and the Washington Canal. At that time, the C&O Canal played a crucial role in the city. This canal was constructed in the early 1800s and ran parallel to the Potomac River. It went from DC to Cumberland, Maryland for about 185 miles with 50 lift locks to overcome elevation changes. And this facilitated trade between the Chesapeake Bay and the Ohio River Valley, effectively allowing for trade between the Midwest and the East Coast. It was a vital transportation route for lumber, coal, and other goods. The Washington Canal was also very important. It was also man-made, and it ran about 2 miles through the city center from the eastern branch of the Potomac to the Tiber Creek. It served as a commercial transportation route and improved drainage in the city. This canal, however, became a huge health hazard, and it eventually became clogged and polluted and smelly. So in the late 19th century to early 20th century, it was completely buried and paved over. The peak of the canals was the 1870s, when the country was rebuilding after the Civil War. However, with several floods, along with the advent of railroads and the decline in canal transportation, these waterways fell into disuse. Much of the canals were filled in as modernity crept forward. The C&O is now the C&O Canal National Historical Park, where you can now hike, bike, boat around, whatever you so please. There's a 1 mile section of the canal where you can take a boat, much like how folks traveled back in the day. The Washington City Canal is now the Washington City Canal Park. Over the years, the little lockkeeper's house evolved. It was for a time a warehouse for park staff, a security point, and even a temporary holding cell for the park police. In the 20th century, the house fell into disuse and sat empty and boarded up on the mall for 40 years. In 2016, however, the Trust for the National Mall, a preservation society tasked with enriching the mall for visitors, put $6 million toward the restoration of the house. I mean, don't you love that there are folks out there completely dedicated to these kinds of things? It's incredible. In October 2017, the house was moved approximately 35 feet to the south and then 35 feet to the west to a location where it would be protected from street traffic and where it could be appropriately showcased on the plaza. The house was also cleaned, and the roof, fireplaces, and chimneys were reconstructed with historic brick. The inside of the home was reappointed, and an exhibit on the history of the home was put up. If you're interested in visiting the lockkeeper's house, it is open Thursday through Sunday from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. It's right by the Washington Monument, so easy to spot. The canals only lasted a couple of decades of American history. Many might view this as a failure, but I personally don't think so. These waterways helped us grow as a nation and allowed for trade and were vital to folks traveling in the 1800s. In my view, Washington had the right idea. If you've been here or have thoughts after watching this video, please let me know in the comments what you think. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe for more, and until next time, goodbye all!